I think we're ready to go, Mr. Chair. As ever, there's always a slight lag on the YouTube feed. So if anybody is watching it, they're watching us slightly in the past.
Thank you, Matt. Right, good evening, councillors, and with one member of the public, and the admin officer is here, and of course your good self, Matt Snowden, the deputy clerk. Milan is here regarding the application on Langham Close, regarding the proposed planning application into East Riding. Milan is representing the residents, and he will speak when that item comes on the agenda, which happens to be the first item with the planning applications that we've got to discuss. I'll just remind you all of the protocols. We're now live streaming on YouTube, and I hope that you will have a good evening at this meeting tonight and make the right decisions. Did you want to say something, Matt? Were you indicating?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to remind members that as we're being broadcast, as with any meeting, if people could mind the sort of the usage of language that they use. Planning can be a very passionate issue, but we do need to make sure that we're respectful to the planning system and to people who are applying through the system, who are fulfilling their legal entitlement to do so, and also take this opportunity to thank the East Riding, who we do work closely with and do allow us to have extensions on some applications if they don't fit our meeting schedule. Without that, for example, the application that Milan said to speak on, the deadline for us to comment has passed, but they've agreed to extend it to enable us to discuss it at this meeting. So just for all members to be minded that we are in public, and that members of the public who put in planning applications are doing it with best of intentions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So without further ado, we'll move over to apologies. I think you've got a couple of apologies, Matt. The Mayor, Councillor Tom Astell, and Linda is in for him. She's substituting, and also Councillor David Tucker, who's undergone a procedure today, and we wish him well.
Also, Mr. Chair, Councillor Boynton has emailed to pass it on his apologies as well.
Thanking you. Is that agreed that we accept those apologies? Thank you. So item 3 then, declarations, 3A, to record declarations of interest by any member of the council in respect of the agenda items listed below. Members declaring the interest should identify the agenda item at type of interest being declared. And 3B, to note dispensations given to any member of the council in respect of the agenda items below. 4 then, to note the minutes of Planning, Property and Services Committee held on the 5th of January, which was previously approved by full council on the 11th of January. Delegated decisions, item 5. You've all had these circulated to you. I don't think there's any need for us to go through them one by one. If you've no objections to them, I'm sure you've done a good job there, Matt, thanking you, to get the responses in on time with these minor applications. Yes, Ian.
Mr. Chair, just the first one, the filling. I know filling stations are really hot properties at the moment, and a bit of an issue. But the illumination and all the shell stuff that's on that already passed application, it's going to be like a swathe of white as you run off down the southern bypass.
Yeah.
And I know there is a comment on the agenda regarding light pollution, quite rightly. But yeah, I think we're in interesting and challenging times. Anyway, it's there anyway, isn't it? So
I think, Ian, if you recall, we did pass comments about that in our objection to it, and another parish council also passed a similar concern close by to us.
I think we're in the world of lumens, aren't we?
Yeah. Have you got your hand up, Anne?
Yes. It's also, if you've got too many signs like that, it's so distracting when you're driving.
Yeah.
I think it's very dangerous.
Yeah. Okay then. So you're all in agreement with that, right? Right then. The main one of the main items on the agenda before us this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is the planning applications, and item. The first item is Westwood Park Residential Home, Forlangham Close, Beverley. You'll have all a chance to have a look at it online, and there are several letters of objection, as Matt states in the quite a few actually in his notes. Councillor Johnson, Linda's requested that this application be taken to the appropriate planning committee at East Riding. She's already done that as a ward member. She's called it in, but it's for us to decide tonight and raise concerns if we have any, and for us to lodge our comments to the planning authority. They do take our comments rather serious, because they have to do by law. It's each parish and town council, the planning authority consults with them, and if they respond, the planning committee has to take our responses into consideration when determining each application. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Milan. Milan's come to speak, as I said earlier on behalf of the residents who live down Langham Close and surrounding area. Over to you, Milan.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a quick introduction. My name is Milan Tojic. I live on the corner of New Walk and Langham Close. I'd like to thank Matt for inviting me to speak this evening. Just to let you know, there's 10 other households who I'm speaking on behalf of, as well as myself. There's 5 areas which I'd like to focus on, which are of concern to us. These are the scale and size of the proposal, the Conservation Officer's comments, the suitability of Langham Close for this development, parking and traffic. So just moving on to the first issue, the scale of the building. The application is for 52 apartments. This comprises of 29 single beds, 22 double beds, a guest apartment, dining, communal, kitchen and staff areas. The development is over 3 floors with a large pitched roof. This compares to the existing nursing home, which is 2-storey, flat roofed and on a much smaller footprint. It's actually difficult to grasp how big this scheme actually is. And the way I visualise it is by comparing it to McCarthy's Molescroft development, which is half a mile away.
Yeah.
Which I don't think anybody would say is modest. But the Molescroft scheme is 32 apartments. This scheme is 52 apartments. So it's 60% larger than the site half a mile away in Molescroft, and it's this sheer bulk and size, which impacts on the surrounding area and nearby housing. So this leads onto the conservation officer's comments. So we're disappointed by what he's got to say, and we'll explain. I'll explain why. Within a few days of the application going live, the conservation officer has made his submission, and he said he had no objection to the scheme. So I'm just going to quote from his submission. So what he said is, it is considered that the proposal is of an acceptable scale. The submitted context drawings show that the scale would not dominate within the surrounding area of the conservation area. In the paragraph before that, he's describing what's there now. And he's saying it's a mid-20th century nursing home. And then he goes on to say, which was demolished against application ... Well, the building hasn't been demolished. The building still stands. So the conservation officer hasn't been to the site to have a look, because if he had, he'd have seen that the building was still standing, which begs the question, how on earth can he say that it will have no impact on the surrounding areas if he hasn't actually been to the site, viewed it, stood in the affected gardens, and looked at the individual perspectives? And I'd just like to give some examples of this. There's Mr. and Mrs. Stanley at 7 Langholm Close. They're going to have 24 windows overlooking their garden. We've got Mark and Melanie Frost, who live in the cottage immediately to the north of the site. They're going to have part of their garden in shade, plus they're going to be totally overwhelmed by the size of the building next door. You've got the householders on 7 Corners Lane, and they're going to be tight on to a huge gable end. And that's the view that anybody walking up and down 7 Corners Lane is going to have to enjoy forevermore. So, like I said, it's disappointing, and we're confused as to why the conservation officer hasn't actually been on site. So I'm going to move on to the suitability of Langholm Close. Langholm Close is not adopted, and it is unlikely it ever will be. McCarthy's, in their application, have said that the lane is perfectly adequate and they will not be making any changes whatsoever. Now, I'd just like to talk briefly about maintenance or lack of on the lane. Now, there's a loose obligation on behalf of the householders to maintain the lane. However, there's no management committee overseeing this. There's no set number of years maintenance needs to be undertaken, and there's no mechanism for what happens if one or more householders doesn't agree with the cost or the extent of the work. The upshot of this is that nothing gets done, and year after year the condition of the lane gets worse. As we speak, the lane has potholes and it has a broken surface. After the first 30 yards, there's no pavement and there isn't any lighting. So at night, it's pitch black down there. I don't know if any of you have been after dark, but you need a torch. You need a torch to walk down there. You can't see where you're putting your feet. And I have to make the point. I don't know if this is a stupid point, but I have to make the point that if lighting and pavements didn't matter, then why do we bother with them? So that's all I have to say on that. And then there's further down the lane, there's a pinch point where 2 cars cannot pass. So that's something that highways definitely need to look at. Just moving onto parking, the scheme has 36 parking spaces. This is to cater for 51 flat owners, 17 plus staff, gardeners, maintenance, and visitors. So without a shadow of a doubt, there's going to be times when the car park's full and there's going to be overspill, and people will park down Langholm Close. This turns Langholm Close into a single lane carriageway. And if you're walking up or down Langholm, then you're going to have to negotiate parked cars. You're going to have traffic coming towards you. You're going to have traffic behind you. You don't have a pavement and there's no lighting. So again, you know, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. The other thing, there's a section of lane where if people do park, then emergency vehicles won't be able to get by. And my final point is traffic. Now, McCarthy's in their application, I've tried to draw an equivalence between their scheme and the existing nursing home, which we believe is disingenuous. Now, the nursing home catered for end of life and dementia patients. Nobody had a car. McCarthy's are building independent living apartments for the over 70s, where car ownership is optional. And just because you're 75 doesn't mean you won't have a car. So I'll also make the point that the old folks in the care home didn't use Amazon and they didn't get the shopping delivered by Tesco's. So there's obviously going to be a significant increase in the level of traffic to the site. And on that note, that's me done. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Milan. Very in-depth contribution there. You've glossed over it. I'm sure you could carry it on, but you've got your main points over on behalf of the residents as well. Just for interest, Milan, my mother was in the old Westwood Park. She was there, and you're absolutely right. It's dark and dingy. Is that lane? And in actual fact, you struggled with only the amount of car parking space there to get turned around and come back down the correct way. And indeed, I think I'm not right in saying this, Milan, but I did notice quite a few cars turning around in people's driveways down that lane. So yeah, I've had one or two indications. Linda first, and then Anne, and then David. I've got you.
Thank you for that resume, Milan. I'm Councillor Johnson, so I'm one of your ward councillors as well. So as you know, when this comes to planning, it will be heard by the relevant planning committee. The applicant is allowed to speak, a resident is allowed to speak, and usually the ward councillor, but indeed any ward councillors can speak. Will you be the representative for the residents who will be speaking?
I won't. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we've asked a planning consultant, is a former planning officer called Chris Kendall, to speak on our behalf. I don't have the planning skills to put the objections in the planning context. So we felt we needed a professional to do it on our behalf.
Fantastic. I would just ask that I could be put in touch with as your ward councillor with Mr. Kendall, if possible, please.
Absolutely. How do I do that?
Well, Matt, you can pass on Linda's contact details. Yeah, that's okay, Milan.
No,
yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
So we did actually write to all the residents roundabout, so you will have my details. The three of us ward councillors wrote to all the residents with this application.
Okay, no, that's good. Yeah, we'll have that then.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. And you as well.
Thank you, Linda. David.
Thank you. I have been delivering this area for some years, and I have also on 2 occasions been a resident in the home briefly while recovering from operations. So I have a definite interest without having an interest, if you understand the technicalities. And I can certainly confirm everything that has been said on behalf of the residents. The care home takes up a part of the site, leaving a substantial garden and a reasonable space for parking for the amount of parking that was going on while in use as a care home with, as he says, quite a few of residents who really didn't have visitors at all. And so this is a very substantial change of use, as well as the expansion in size. This is an area also which is in and adjacent to a conservation area, and therefore the sheer scale of the building and its impact through scale on surrounding properties ought to be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anne?
I was concerned that the conservation guy hasn't been on site, obviously, because he didn't know the building was still there. And I think we ought to make some fuss about that, because it makes you wonder what other planning applications haven't really been looked at properly.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, it just seems to me a terrible idea, the whole thing.
I'm sure Councillor Linda Johnson will have made a note of that, and she'll be raising it with the appropriate senior planning officer. Any more comments on that? No.
It's just a terrible idea.
So can I have a proposal from you, please? We obviously we are, well, I think it's a terrible idea. So the proposal would be that we object, and I see Matt's got his hand up because he's going to help me out here with some words, I hope. Can you unmute yourself, Matt?
Whoops, sorry about that. From what's been said, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the material factors that could be taken into consideration, and the 5 that appear relevant are overlooking and loss of privacy, inadequate parking, overbearing nature of the proposal, access and highway safety issues, and public visual amenity. So that if you're going to object, they may be the 5 areas you want to consider in terms of the material objections. Some of the things that you may want to object to don't necessarily fall into the as the non-material. They fall into the non-material, which can't normally be considered in an application. But with what Milan said, what councillor has said, the information on the application, it could be possible with those 5 material reasons to give examples for them with this application if councillors were minded to object.
Right. Linda.
I think Milan used a very salient word, and that was bulk, the bulk of the building. And I think that's a very valid word to use.
Yes. Thank you. David?
The word that might go with bulk is overdevelopment. This is out of scale, with what makes sense. And with that, you might also mention conservation issues, in that the impact of a property on adjoining properties is supposed to be taken into account to a greater degree in conservation areas.
Yeah. Milan, can I just ask, is there any, obviously there's wildlife down there, is there any I'm assuming it'd be bats, and with the property being empty, there's likely to be bats there. They're protected. Is there any other wildlife as well?
I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if McCarthy's have done any reports on this or not, but I'm not aware of anything now.
I've got you in. I'm just looking at the Nature Conservation Officer, biodiversity and protected species holding objection. What does that? What's that classed as, Matt? Holding objection.
Holding objections are where they're waiting for usually, and Libby, correct me if I'm wrong, but where they're waiting for more evidence and more advice from the appropriate authorities. For example, a holding objection on a conservation ground being that providing they can prove they're going to do it in a certain way, there's either an objection or no objection. It's a holding comment.
So they haven't actually got the report for the wildlife, whether there's anything protected there. I think we should mention that in our objection as well somewhere, because I know the area, and there's sure to be some protected species of some sort of wild animal.
Mr. Chair, one of the limiting factors is loss of ecological habitat, and if there were bats within the building, whilst it's not an organic thing like a tree, it's loss of the habitat. So you could put in a comment that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah. Ian.
I was just going to point out that in the supporting documentation, the very point that you raised, Mr. Chair, was that bats are mentioned upon by the Conservation Officer, but not in great detail.
No.
But it's a triumph of greed over character, isn't it?
Yeah. So have we got a way of words, Matt? Do you know?
If councillors are wanting to object on grounds of overlooking loss of privacy, inadequate parking, overbearing nature of the proposal, access and highway safety, public visual amenity, and also concerns regarding any nature or biodiversity, I can put in more detail, working with you, Mr. Chair, the examples of that within the application. So if councillors want to consider that as their proposal tonight, if they're so minded, we can then write it up tomorrow morning, and I can liaise with you to get the final wording.
Yeah. Well, I would formally move that then from the chair. Have I got a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gow. So all those in favour, please show. Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thanks. Well, thank you, Milan, for presenting your objection, and that's it. You're free to go now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Right then, application number 2 is land southwest of Stone Cottage, Long Lane, Woodmansea, and there's the next one as well. Can you mute, Claire? Thank you.
Sorry, I had a problem with my internet. It went down.
Yeah, thank you. And the next application, land southwest of Stone Cottage, Long Lane, Woodmansea. It's the first one is increasing by 1, so from 145 to 146, and the second application is increasing it from 155 to 157. I think we should just note it as Matt has suggested. They're not overly big by, it's just from what I've seen, Matt, it's the self and same size. Yeah. Linda.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. It's not a huge change. It's just where the councillors feel there's a principle.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it's 255 to 257, not 155 to 157.
Oh, that's a grammatical error. Sorry, you're correct. Yeah, you've got your figures wrong, Matt. Yeah. Okay.
Only next door to it.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That was in my line, but it is also there on the main descriptor.
Yeah.
Apologies for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Indeed. Can I just make a comment? The government are actually bringing in new rules and regulations with regard to increasing the natural environment, the biodiversity of developments. And I just think this is like scope creep. I know it's only 1 and 2 buildings, 1 and 2 houses, and we desperately need houses. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that it's just more land being covered with concrete, less land to absorb CO2, less land for wildlife, for plants and insects and so on. That's my only concern about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Ian?
The amount of planning and the amount of thought that goes into these developments, somebody must get awfully excited when they realise they get another £300,000 plot out of it. And it is just cynical manipulation of the whole system. I'm sure there won't be classed as affordable housing or anything like that. Or if you find a space, put affordable housing in that small space that you found. These guys design these sites to such detail. They must be terribly excited to have to change it to add one single plot, and I just think it's terrible. It's the further abuse of our environment.
Thank you, Ian. So I think we agree. We've just noted. It's no good us commenting. We all feel the same. But I think the. Are you indicating, Claire?
Can't we just put that it's overdevelopment?
Well, no, it's already been passed.
Oh, right, okay.
So they've already been passed. As this development on south of Beverley. If you feel uncomfortable, Claire, just make a proposal.
Yeah, I'd just like to object on overdevelopment. I propose that it goes back to what it originally was.
And what was that?
Well, you said they've
just open space.
That, yeah, they've take away the addition.
Well, it's because they've discovered that I think they'll have got the calculations wrong. And they'll have discovered they can get an extra 1 in and an extra 2 in.
Well, I propose that we refuse it then.
Okay. Have you got a seconder? Seconded by Anne. Any more comments?
Thanks, Chair.
Any more? No. Right, move to the vote. All those in favour of Claire's proposal, please show. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Thanking you. That's for both items. Claire, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right, moving on to the next item. 21 Highgate, Beverley. Fell one number apple tree due to tree creating shading, is a hazard due to apples dropping, making the area beneath the tree unusable. And roots have lifted existing patio area and could potentially damage the old garden walls and potentially damage the foundations of the neighbouring listed pub due to close proximity, and is now low amenity value. You've seen the photograph that's in the application, I guess. Yes, Anne.
I'm not objecting. I just think it's hilarious that they're putting the fact that apples fall off trees. I mean, you know, Newton did the gravity stuff on that. You can't stop apples falling off trees, whatever you do. Do we pull down all apple trees? Sorry, I just couldn't say that seriously.
Yeah. Anybody else wish to comment? So, Beverley, it suggested by Matt that Beverley Town Council has no objection to his application on the condition that all works take place at the time that will have least negative impact to wildlife. Do we agree on that? Yeah, agreed. Armstrong Social Club then suggested its change of use, multi-purpose use, change from a sports social club to flexible use comprising of a place of worship, sports and social club, community facility, use of class 1, F1, sorry, food and drink usage, use class E, assembly and leisure use class E, non-residential institutions use creches, day nursery use class E, and business use. So it's a multi-purpose community centre, which is a good, it's putting a good building to perfect use. And the suggestion is that we have no objection to this application. I'd just like to mention though, the only concern that I've raised in the past, and I think it's, I'll throw this one onto the table for you, so you can pick it up, Claire, if you wish. And that is, we could do with some more safety barrier around the corner, because people have got a tendency to step out and not use the pedestrian crossing that's there. I raised it with Alan Menzies months ago. I said, Alan, what's the point of having a zebra crossing where it is if people are just going to walk straight across and be an hazard to the motorist? And with this, I don't want to jeopardise this proposal because it's a good use of an empty building. But with this, there's going to be a lot more people using it on foot, and therefore it could be, hopefully not, an accident waiting to happen on that corner. So I'd just like to put that one in with our, we don't object to it, but could they look seriously at highways about the use, the pedestrian use on that corner, and I do believe, I'm not certain, Matt, that they've got, I don't know whether they've got a barrier to stop people walking straight out onto the road from the access on they have they? On Armstrong Way?
Yeah, you steer towards the existing zebra crossing that's there. The problem you've got is that Beverley College, and also if there's going to be a nursery, you'll have people rushing over the level crossing, heading towards, and people step up on the corner. You're quite right, Peter. There should be barriers that are funneling people towards the zebra crossing.
Yeah. Is there? Yeah, I've got you, Claire. Is there a barrier at the entrance on Armstrong Way to stop people when they're coming out stepping onto the road?
There is towards the corner, but of course there's vehicular access because they used to have deliveries. They used to have the fishman used to deliver there.
Yeah.
So there's nothing actually at the front. Of course, they have lookable gates, but no, that whole corner adjacent to the level crossing needs significant fencing for. I experience it almost every day, especially when the college is in. It's crazy.
I'll take Claire first, Matt, and then you. Okay. Claire.
So I propose that we accept this on the proviso that they put bollards to stop people crossing at any other spot other than the barriers, on both sides of the road, and that East Riding should fund it as part of it.
Barriers on the proviso, we can't.
I propose that we accept the whole thing of what they're proposing to do with Armstrong's curb, but on condition that they put barriers both sides of the road.
Yeah. Have you somebody prompting you, Claire, in the background? Because I can hear a second voice. Claire, have you got somebody prompting you?
Why?
Because I can hear a voice in the background telling you what to say, and it's wrong. I'd like to remind you, Claire, that members of the public are not supposed to speak unless the chair allows them to.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So, yes, Matt.
Yeah, proposed wording, because we can't demand that the request that the applicant put stuff out because it's public highways.
Yeah.
The proposal could be Beverley Town Council has no objection to this application on the condition the applicant works with East Riding of Yorkshire Council to improve pedestrian access to the site with enhanced barriers on the pavement close to the facility.
Yeah.
That way, we're not demanding it of the applicant because it may be not within their power, but we're hoping they'll work with the local authority because they're changing the use of the site to improve the security and safety.
Yeah. Is that agreed then? We follow Matt's suggestion. Yeah. All agreed? Yeah. Land east of 121 Laregate, Beverley, erection of a dwelling with associated access and parking, and it's a revised scheme of 190327 PLF. And the suggestion is that Beverley Town Council has no objection to this application. All agreed? Ian, did you want to speak?
Just that in the previous instance that we talked about on New Walk of the squeezing and other people squeezing everything. This is the smallest possible plot and nicely tucked away and well thought of and well designed on examination of the drawings. So no objection to it at all. And that's the sort of thing that people need to be working on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just got it up here. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. Yeah. So no objection then. No. The next item is 42 Central Avenue, Beverley. Alterations to roof, erection of extensions at ground and first floor level, application of larch cladding, removal of existing carport, alterations to existing garage to create garden room and associated works. And again, suggested comments, Beverley Town Council has no objection. Is that agreed? Yeah. 8 New Begin, Beverley. Variation to condition approved plans, and it's existing dwelling. It's to create one additional dwelling with associated works, including erection of a timber porch and installation of roof lights to the rear. And the suggested comments is the Beverley Town Council has no objection. Yeah. 10 York Road, Beverley. It's in a conservation area, and this is to reduce 1 number flowering cherry tree to by 1.2 meters and crown thin by 30% due to trees suffering extensive areas of decay and historic pruning wounds, and side reduce away from access road by up to 6 meters to ensure adequate clearance. And again, with no objection, so long as the work takes place, not interfering with the wildlife. Is that agreed? Yeah. Monk's Walk, 19 Highgate, internal alterations to ground floor to replace existing bar, and to first floor alterations to the staircase, form an opening between rooms and create a cupboard and work and repair works. And again, Matt's put no objection to this application on the condition that recommendations that may be made by Historic England, conservation, etc., are followed where applicable. We all agreed with that. Did you want to say something, Ian?
Do you remember when pubs were open? And
Yeah.
Matt will support me in this. I mean, the Monk's Walk has a fabulous music scene, the upstairs at Monk's, and the need to sustain and maintain and to get people in safely and to be able to use the stairwell properly. I've been up there to see music on many occasions, and sometimes I come down unsteady. It must be the lack of oxygen that occurs while I'm upstairs. But we should support everything to get these venues going again.
Yeah, nothing to do with the drinking, but anyway, it's lack of oxygen.
I very dare you.
Yeah. Right. Okay then. Oh, Linda.
As well, Councillor Astor, can I comment as well? I just want to support Ian in what he said.
Yeah.
You know, I too have felt unsteady in my feet coming down from upstairs, and of course the Monk's Walk has got that absolutely fabulous wall in it, which is probably not much younger than the Minster, in fact. So I know that Jill will do absolutely everything they can to maintain the historic interest of it while creating a safer venue for the music. And being a pub, and boy, that'll be the first place I go when I'm allowed to.
All right then, so in agreement with that. Westwood Villa, 29 Westwood Road, Beverley. Erection of a single-story building, single-story extension to the rear, following part removal of existing, alterations to garage stroke outbuilding to create additional living accommodation at first floor, and erection of a new wall with wooden gate. And the suggestion is we don't have any objection to that. No, that agreed. New Biggin House, 10 New Biggin, Beverley, external alterations to the side to remove window and install French door and reinstate original window. No objections. Yeah. And M&S Food Hall, 25 Butcher Row, Beverley, display of 3 number externally illuminated fascia signs, 2 number externally illuminated hanging signs, 1 number non-illuminated totem sign and display of a new internally applied vinyl graphics. Okay, no objection. Thank you. 7 then, allotments. 7A, the waiting list. Over to Town Clerk for a report, or Libby, whichever.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Libby for pulling this information together as ever. The current figures are 43 within the boundaries on the waiting list. But again, of these 43, one's been offered a plot and 12 are waiting for the other half of their existing plot, which means out of those 43, 30 have either not been offered or don't already have half a plot. And the waiting list remains at 28 for outside the town boundaries. There is a small amount of changeover on a tiny number of plots, but things are remaining pretty steady with the levels relatively high. If Libby's got anything else to comment on that, please do. But I think, you know, it's just how things are. And it's, again, popular allotment, desire to have allotments is becoming increasingly popular.
Thank you. No comments. 7B, drainage issues on Kelgate allotments. It says Deputy Town Clerk to report. Well, I got a copy of an email which Matt forwarded on, and there you go. That was over the weekend, last week. We actually, Linda and myself, went up there on yesterday. We spoke to an allotment holder, plot holder, and he introduced us to a resident who knows chapter and verse about these floodings. Subsequently to that, what happens? It floods like this, and then within a couple of days, it drains away. It goes away fairly quickly, so they tell me. But nonetheless, as you can see, it's like a pond, and it's fairly deep as well. It's got well, when I was up in October time, I couldn't go any further, otherwise it would have been over my Wellingtons, and it was same again at the weekend. Linda and myself went up yesterday, as I say. We got introduced to this guy off Kelgate, and he's taken all these photos, which he's got a portfolio which he's sent a lot of photos to Matt, and it is bad. It's not the first time this has happened. It's several times it's happened in definitely the last year. Linda's on the case with East Riding. She's written to the officer at East Riding, waiting a response from that officer. Hopefully the officer will get Yorkshire Water involved. She's going to keep on the case, is Linda. I can't see her, Matt. Can't see Linda because I can see Ian wanting to speak. I think we've seen all that now. That's better. Yeah. And so yeah, it's bad. And one thing Linda and myself did pick up yesterday was we charged them rent last year, albeit not full rents. And at and a lot of there's about a dozen or so plots that was flooded, and this poor chap yesterday said to me, he said, and Linda, he said, I lost all my spuds. I had a good crop of spuds and they were all rotten. And, you know, they paid good money for the allotment plot. They paid good money for the manure and so on, and the seed potatoes, only to be flooded like this. So at some point, we might like to consider some form of recompense at a future meeting for that. But it is bad. And the other major concern that Linda and myself had, I don't know whether you're familiar. I think majority of you will be familiar with the area. I don't know about Lynn, Anne, and Claire. Are you familiar with it, both of you? Right. Well,
with Kitchen Lane.
No, it's Kelgate, Claire.
Right.
Up from the zebra crossing at Kitchen Lane, going west. Yeah.
All right.
The concern that was pointed out to us was the council houses that set back lower than the road, and the terraced houses which are adjacent to the footpath, which a couple of them back on to the allotments, they're even lower still. And it was pointed out to us that the fear is that this floods really bad, and then we would have East Riding would have a job on their hands because properties would be flooded, and that is a real concern. Nevertheless, as I said, Linda's on the case, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to Linda about this today, but I suspect we haven't got an answer yet, Linda. So, but I can see people indicating wanting to speak. Ian, you had your hand up. Yeah.
This is apparently a new problem on old plots, isn't it? There's something radically changed. Is that right?
It's been a problem this last 3 years. It's got worse. Certainly this last year, it's got really bad.
Right. So there is a new and significant drainage issue that hasn't previously existed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Yorkshire Water and East Riding need to make something up and do something about it.
Well, Linda will come in and tell you what she's done, but she's contacted a very senior officer at East Riding who deals with this sort of thing, and no doubt he will come down, have a site meeting with us, and I'm hoping he'll bring a Yorkshire Water person that day, or come make arrangements for Yorkshire Water to come down. Linda, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, only to say Steve Charlton is the senior flood man. So I've written to him. I know he would have got back to me today if he could have done. Various other letters I've sent to other people have been replied to. I'm sure he'll be back tomorrow. He might even have been down himself today and had a look. We just don't know. But he's pretty on the case.
Yeah. So that's it from my perspective. Oh, Matt, you want to speak? Sorry.
Yeah, just because I mean, Councillor Estelle will be aware, but just for other councillors for context, the land is actually owned by East Riding of Yorkshire Council. Beverley Town Council took out a lease on it in February 2015. Part of the lease includes to maintain and keep on and thoroughly cleansed all ditches, gutters, drains, under drains, tunnels, watercourses, if any, on the land. So what's important about what councillors Estelle and Johnson have done is to get the East Riding to look at it, because this sort of issue might not have, whilst it could be our responsibility, it might not be, depending where the issue is. The water might be manifesting it itself on that land as one of the only ways out. But the actual, if there is a blockage or damage, it could be elsewhere. So it's important that we get it thoroughly checked out. So if it is our responsibility, we take it on. But if it isn't our responsibility, the appropriate body deals with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that okay then, that report, councillors? Yeah, thank you. 7C Heritage Open Days, to consider a request from Beverley Civic Society to include the allotments as part of the Heritage Open Days 11th and 12th of September 2021. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Every year, there's a national 2 days of Heritage Open Days. I'm sure people will be aware of that, and councils may have visited some of the open houses that have been open in the past, and the Civic Society manages this. Each year there's a theme, and their theme for 2021 is edible. Therefore, we've had an email from Rosie Ryan at the Civic Society asking if they could factor the allotments in. Of course, it's all COVID pandemic providing. Therefore, it's just my suggestion that we set up a Zoom meeting between myself, the chair of PPS, and Libby as the allotments administrator, with Rosie Ryan and another member of the Civic Society, to discuss what they're looking at and to see how this could move forward.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Any other allotment issues, Matt?
Just one, Mr. Chair, just so members are aware, because we're aware that, you know, different councillors know allotment holders, and if there's an issue, sometimes they'll mention it to a councillor. There's one particular issue on Spark Mill. There's currently cockerel, which isn't permitted on allotment land. The law is very specific. You're allowed to keep hens, but not chickens. So hens in the female of the species, because of the noise the cockerel creates. So we are currently investigating that and trying to ascertain exactly which plot it's on. So if anybody does get in touch with any councils regarding it, it's something that Libby is on the case with.
What a wonderful comment to brighten up the meeting. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Matt. 8 then, electrical work at the lockup. This is for me to report. Yeah, Councillor Duncan, Jack and myself have been tidying up down there so we can get the lights back into storage. And we've discovered, to make it easier for our friend at East Riding, Peter Jacobson, and his team, to test and repair the Christmas lights in the building, we would need a proper fitted electrical socket close by. Incidentally, there is no electrical sockets in the storage stroke workplace. They're all in the office or near to the office. So what we've said to Matt is we would like committee's permission for Matt to get our electrician who does work in the office to give a quote for running a cable from the appropriate fuse box and just fit a socket. That way it would save Peter Jacobson running an extension lead with cables all over the place, and it would be far easier if they could just plug in the testing equipment to test the Christmas lights. Yeah. Okay, David.
A very minor amendment. Can we change the agenda to read tested rather than rested?
Yeah.
We'll rest after we've tested.
Yeah. Is that okay then, that we give Matt authority to to go ahead with getting the electrician and come down and do it for us. Yeah, thank you.
And if you're all right, Mr. Chair, I'll liaise with you about the time where they can meet you at the lockup, because you know exactly what's required.
Yeah. Yeah. Benches, item 9, to receive information about a meeting to take place tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Over to you, Deputy.
Yeah, this committee's discussed the want for the desire to put more benches in town, and the new financial year includes the provision for that in the new budget. So in prep for that, myself, Councillor Estelle as chair of PPS, and Councillor Johnston as chair of Policy and Finance, with the financial implication, are meeting tomorrow afternoon for a Zoom meeting with Ian Sugden from East Riding, to see how we can progress this and work in partnership with East Riding, and we will report back at the next PPS meeting.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanking you. Litter bin audit, item 10, to consider carrying out a litter bin audit to ascertain which were originally purchased by the town council and which require repairing, replacing, etc. And I suppose, Matt, we could, the benches which we've just discussed, also there is litter bins uptown, and I know if Councillor Tucker had been here, he would have been speaking, because he's come up with the idea that the litter bins, the majority of them are overflowing at the best of times. I walked through the town yesterday morning fairly early, and the majority of them were full from what appeared to be a busy Sunday, which is good news. Had it been a normal Sunday under a normal circumstance without this pandemic, I think the bins would have been overflowing. Well, David's idea is to replace, funds, if funds will permit, to replace them with a bigger litter bin, the type that you can put a big wheelie bin inside. And then when the wheelie bin's full, obviously it's far more easier for the litter man, the bin man, to come on, put it in onto the back of his cart, up she goes, down and straight in back into the litter bin. And the thing is that if we replace the litter bin, are you wanting to speak, Claire?
Yeah, I was just going to say, can't we have some of those ones like they have where it tells them when it needs emptying?
You can if you've got £4,000.
I thought there were £3,000.
Well, £3,000. Make a donation and buy one.
No, town council's got lots of money.
Oh, have they? All right. Anyhow, so the idea behind it is that if we replace a smaller bin with one of these big bins, we would have a bin to put elsewhere. So we're replacing a bin, and that smaller bin can go elsewhere, be sited elsewhere, on the periphery of the town. Yeah, are you in agreement with it? Oh, sorry, Linda.
Yeah, the Lib Dem group actually brought a motion to East Riding Full Council last time about litter. we would rather see people take the litter home, quite honestly, rather than leave it in bins. Some of our bins are definitely past their sell-by date and do need to be replaced. But I'm not quite sure whether putting a wheelie bin in a bigger bin in the middle of Beverley town centre is the thing to do, really. I would need to see what these things look like. Those bins, Claire, that you mentioned, the Mr. what they call Mr. something or other, that one is being trialled by the town, by the East Riding Council, and they are quite impressed with it. So it might be something that we can work with East Riding on to do a kind of a buy one get one free.
Because the ones that you put the wheelie bin in are all very well, but I see what you mean. They are quite unsightly because they've got one just by the bridge at Ticton as you walk over the footbridge. So obviously it's quite tall, but it's not the most attractive thing I've ever seen.
No, quite.
All right then.
Quite. I would really need to see these. But I don't think the answer is putting more bins in. It's perhaps making, but tidying them up is a good idea. But I think we could negotiate with the East Riding for more of those smart bins, because at the moment they are quite impressed with it. What it does, you put your litter in and it compacts it.
Yeah, it compacts it down, so you get twice as much in, not more.
Well, 5 times as much in, and then it tells you when it's full. So it doesn't have to be emptied as frequently. So I think what we need to look at is where the bins are being most used, and perhaps replace 1 or 2 with those bins.
Yeah, I've got you, Matt. Yeah. So can I have a show of hands? Are you in favour of replacing them or not? It sounds very much as though you're not in favour of replacing them. In fact, it sounds as though you're in favour of getting rid of litter bins, and we promote taking litter home. I think that's going to go down well with the public. We'll have more litter on the streets.
I think there's a culture amongst certain sectors where they don't know how to put rubbish in a bin.
Pardon?
There is a culture amongst certain sectors where they don't know how to put rubbish in a litter bin, especially down Coltman Avenue where I live. They shove it in my hedge or on the floor. They just eat whatever it is they've got in their hand and then just drop it on the floor. So they...
Right.
Yeah, and
Ian.
David was...
Can you mute Linda? David.
Can we consider what options are available to us and ask Linda perhaps to look at that and come back to us at the next meeting?
Thank you. Ian.
I think the idea of educating people into taking their waste home and recycling it is fabulous, but I think it will be a massive PR disaster. Council removes rubbish bins.
Yeah.
That ain't going to happen. We need to maintain our existing stock and slowly create a culture change.
Yeah. Matt.
Yeah, just to come back to the actual agenda item, which is to consider carrying out an audit of litter bins. This is more of a fundamental issue we need to address. Over the past years, the town council has worked in partnership with the East Riding, where the town council has purchased bins, some bins. They handed over to the East Riding, who maintain and empty them. There isn't a definitive list of which these bins are. So when you go around the town, you will see in some places there is a bin with a town council crest on it. Another bin, maybe on the same street, doesn't. That indicates the one with the crest was purchased initially by the town council. Now, the East Riding team have been good enough to send me a list showing where all the bins are, but they don't indicate which they originally purchased and which we initially purchased. I was hoping we might be able to carry out the audit ourselves. It would take a bit of time, and it would mean councillors working with officers to maybe take specific areas of the town to then list the bin, to note which bins have the town crest on So then officers we can put together an electronic map showing where they are. This audit would also enable councils to identify bins that, regardless of who's put them there, bins that look like they require replacement or refurbishment. So if councillors were happy to look at this, I could produce sections of the town, and then councillors that are interested could take that list and hopefully support us by going around and helping us with that list.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Matt. That and we can come back to a future meeting. In the meantime, the other issue about the litter bins, we can call that a work in progress. And if
we could also mention, Mr. Chair, tomorrow, see if it's in Douglas department or another, to see if there's any discussion as well. So if councils are happy, over the next week or so or two, I'll try and put, because we've got quite a lot on at the moment, I'll start putting together that list of areas and then liaise with members to potentially pick up the ones lists that near where they live.
Yeah. That's fine then, Matt. Yeah. So we all agreed with that. Yeah, fine. Did you want to say something, Claire?
I was going to say, I mean, you could have the taller ones. It just depends where it is.
Yeah. Okay, Claire, thank you for that. Yeah. Item 11 then, planting up and related subjects. It's just to receive an update, just to update you all, for those of you that's not members of policy. Policy committee agreed up to a figure of £3,000 to spend on various planting up initiatives. Yes, Claire.
Does that mean we get some nice daffodils in the brick planters on Swinemore?
Not yet, no.
Oh.
Pardon?
That's fine.
Claire, Claire, there's somebody prompting you.
No, there isn't. There's nobody in the room.
Well, I can hear them laughing.
No,
everybody's muted here. Everybody's muted here, and I can hear somebody giggling.
Well, you're imagining it because there's nobody here.
All right. So, it's just to update you that policy committee have agreed a sum of up to £3,000. Basically, it's for planters to go on Coltman Avenue. You'd be pleased, music to your ears, Claire. And there's daffodils being already planted on Coltman Avenue, which is more new music to your ears. I'm only saddened that we couldn't put any opposite virtually your house, because we came knocking on your door and you wasn't in, so we couldn't leave a trowel and a shovel for you to help plant them. Anyhow, you'll probably get round to doing that next year, Claire.
When I've got a spare 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, but that's it basically. That's all I wanted to report on it at this juncture. Matt? Unmute.
There we go, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to promote the town council's providing a lot of this equipment, the chair suggested that we get some stickers produced, which just the town crest and tagline that could go on hanging on the barrier baskets, on large planters, on a variety. I've been in liaison with a company that we work frequently with to provide stickers, and I have two quotes. These are both for 300 stickers because, believe me, there are a lot of things that need stickers on, and it would also give us a batch in reserve as well to replace. There's either for £276.50, 22 centimetres by 8.5 centimetres, or for a bit more at £334, 28 centimetres by 11 centimetres. Now, given the location of some of the planters being high up on lamp columns, it might be the larger ones would be more suitable. So it's up to the committee to decide which they would rather go with, and then we can process the order. They will have lamination, so that'll afford them protection from UV and scratches, and they're suitable for outdoors. So it'll just be a white rectangular sticker with the town crest and tagline on, so people know it's the council that's provided them. So they wouldn't be too in your face, but they would still provide that.
That's good. All agreed with that then? Yeah.
So would you like to go, is that to go with the 334 for the slightly larger ones?
Yeah. That's all. That's what they're indicating, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attendance this evening. I'll draw the meeting to a close. A rather long meeting, but we've had quite a few planning applications, and that big application right at the top of the planning, and we are beginning to see, we are beginning to move forward with stuff around the town, and it would be nice if councillors could take up